Most kids cry when they're dropped off at school for the first time. I cried when I was dropped off at an orphanage, and my mother didn't look back. She held my hand until the front gate, kissed my forehead like it was a goodbye, and it was. My baby brother Morgan stayed in her arms. He got to go home. I got left behind. No birthday calls. No letters. No visits. Just silence, and a bed in a cold dorm where no one knew my name. They told the world I didn't exist. So I built a life they couldn't ignore. I rose from the floor they left me on. I learned to fight, to study, to survive, and then, to succeed. They gave him everything, but I gave myself more. And years later, when they were drowning in debt, the daughter they erased returned, not to beg, but to buy the home they once refused her. This is not just a story about pain. It's a story about revenge, the kind that grows in silence and blooms in success. I was just 7 years old when the world I knew collapsed in silence. It was a cloudy morning. I remember that clearly, because I kept looking up at the sky, wondering why it looked sad too. My small backpack was clutched tightly in my arms, the pink one with the butterfly on the front. It only had a few clothes inside, some biscuits, and my stuffed bunny, Lily. I didn't understand why we were driving so far or why my father looked so tense. My mother sat quietly beside him, avoiding my eyes. I kept glancing back at Morgan, my baby brother, asleep in his car seat. His tiny hands were curled into fists, his mouth open just slightly. He had a blanket wrapped around him, the one I used to sleep with when I was little. I didn't mind that he had it. I thought we were just going somewhere for the weekend, maybe to visit relatives. But when the car stopped in front of a tall metal gate and I saw the big gray building behind it, my stomach twisted. It didn't look like a house. It looked like something out of a movie, the kind where children were sent when no one else wanted them. The sign read, St. Grace's Orphanage, a home for the unwanted. I remember asking, Mama, why are we here? My voice was barely a whisper. She didn't answer. She opened the door, stepped out, and reached for my hand. I didn't want to go. Something inside me screamed not to move. But I was too young to fight her, too small to run. So I followed, trying to understand. We walked through the gate. An older woman greeted us, she had a clipboard and tired eyes. Is this the one? She asked. My father nodded without looking at me. Yes. This is Alina. I stared at him. What do you mean the one? Still no answer. The woman knelt down to my level and gave me a practiced smile. Hello, sweetheart. You'll be safe here. Safe? My mother bent down, fixed the collar of my shirt, and smoothed my hair. She was crying now, but her hands didn't shake. She leaned in and whispered, "Be brave." Then she kissed my forehead like she was sending me off to school. That's when I knew. They weren't coming back. I clutched her tightly. Please don't leave me here. I'll be good, I promise. I'll help with Morgan. I'll do anything. My mother pulled away gently. She didn't answer. She turned back to the car. I screamed. I begged. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. My knees hit the pavement as I chased after them, but my feet wouldn't move fast enough. The gate slammed shut behind them. The car started. My face was pressed against the metal bars, watching their taillights disappear. And that was it. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. The first night at the orphanage was the longest night of my life. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept thinking it was a mistake. Maybe they would come back. Maybe they'd realize they left the wrong child. Maybe Morgan needed me. But they didn't. And no one explained why. I sat by the window in the dark, holding Lily, my stuffed bunny, until the stuffing started to come out. I didn't care. That bunny was all I had left from the world I lost in one morning. The other girls in the dorm didn't speak to me. One girl whispered to another, "She's the new one." They always cry like that the first night. It was said like a routine, like kids being left behind was just part of life here. I didn't eat the next day. I couldn't. Every meal felt like betrayal. Eating, playing, even breathing, it all felt wrong without knowing why my parents left me. Had I done something bad? Was I too loud? Too stubborn? Not helpful enough? My thoughts kept spinning. Why him? Why Morgan and not me? I loved him. I cared for him. I never felt jealous. I just didn't understand what made him worth keeping and me worth throwing away. I overheard the staff one day, speaking in hushed voices. One of them said, the father said they couldn't afford both children. The boy was younger, needed more attention. So they gave the girl up. Gave the girl up. As if I was a pet. An item they could give away and forget. That night, I sat alone in the hallway with a piece of torn paper and a dull pencil I found in the playroom. I started writing. I didn't know what I was writing, but it poured out of me. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Proof." That became my secret notebook, my proof book. I wrote everything I wanted to do in life. Everything I'd become. Not for them. Not to win them back. But to prove to myself that their choice wouldn't break me. I didn't realize it then, but that terrible day, the day they abandoned me. It didn't end me. It began me. It was the moment I went from being someone's daughter to someone who would never need anyone's permission to exist again. And no matter what I had to go through, every insult, every cold meal, every lonely birthday, I would remember that pink backpack, that rainy sky, and that gate. Because that was the day they left me. But also the day I decided I would never let the world forget me. Life inside St. Grace's orphanage wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was structured, like a machine built to manage forgotten children. Wake-up calls at 6:30 a.m. sharp. Breakfast of bland porridge and dry bread. Chores assigned by age. Lights out by 9 p.m. even if you were in the middle of a book, or your thoughts, or a cry you didn't want anyone to hear. No one yelled at us. No one beat us. But the worst part wasn't loud, it was the silence. No one said you matter. No one tucked us in at night. No one remembered our birthdays unless we reminded them, and even then, it was just a cupcake with waxy frosting and a half-hearted song. The first few weeks, I was in denial. Every time the front gate buzzed, I ran to the window. Maybe they had come back. Maybe they realized it was a mistake. But it was never them. It was always another child arriving, or someone dropping off donations, or a social worker checking in. I kept hoping, until hope became exhausting. And then one morning, I stopped running to the window. That was the day I stopped expecting anything from anyone. The other kids noticed I was different. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't try to make friends. I was polite, respectful, even helpful when asked, but I stayed quiet. Some kids became tough and loud, demanding attention to fill the holes left in their hearts. Others shrank into themselves. I stayed somewhere in between, neither loud nor invisible. Just watching. There was one girl, Zara, who used to sit next to me during reading hour. She always had a way of making the dullest stories feel magical. Once, she whispered, you don't talk much, but you always look like you're thinking about 100 things at once. I was thinking about what I'd lost, what I could never get back, and what I would become one day when I was free from these walls. The only thing that kept me sane was learning. I devoured every book I could find, textbooks, old encyclopedias, even torn-up novels with missing pages. Reading was my escape. While other girls were playing or gossiping, I sat in the corner of the library, sketching ideas into my proof book. My notebook grew fat with pages. Goals. Quotes. Plans. Study hard. Start a business. Never ask anyone for help. At the top of one page, I wrote, "Own a house they can never afford." It sounded impossible back then, but writing it made it feel real. Education was the only thing I could control. I didn't have parents or money, but I had my mind, and I guarded it like treasure. While some kids struggled to pass, I pushed for the top score in every subject. Teachers began to notice. Miss Sana, the math instructor, once said, "You've got an engineer's brain in a little girl's body." I liked that. I wrote it down in the notebook. Still, there were nights that broke me. Nights when I woke from dreams of being home only to find myself back in the same metal bunk bed. Nights when Morgan's laugh echoed in my mind. I remembered the softness of his tiny hands, the way he'd pull on my shirt and giggle. I didn't blame him. He was just a baby. He hadn't chosen to stay while I was sent away. But that didn't make it easier. Some nights, I hated him, not for what he did, but for what he had. He had their love, their protection, their presence. I had dust, silence, and a teddy bear whose seams were splitting. At the age of 10, I watched from a corner as one of the older girls turned 18 and packed her small bag. She had no family to return to, no money, no safety net. She walked out the gate with her head high and tears falling quietly down her cheeks. I asked the staff what would happen to her. They said, "She'll have to figure it out." That terrified me more than anything. Because I knew one day that would be me. From then on, I started preparing. I took on extra chores in exchange for old books. I borrowed a dusty dictionary from the library and started improving my English, sentence by sentence. I wrote fake job resumes just to practice. I even taught myself how to use the clunky computer in the office when no one was watching. I wasn't just surviving. I was sharpening myself. Quietly. Relentlessly. By the time I turned 13, I had already planned my future down to the year. Graduate at 16. Get a scholarship. Learn coding. Get work online. Save enough to rent a room. And then, start something of my own. Something that mattered. I didn't know exactly what it would be yet, but I knew this: I would never be helpless again. The staff started trusting me with more responsibilities. I helped younger girls with homework. I organized the reading corner. One of the volunteers said I had a leader's spirit. That stayed with me, even when no one else believed in me. But belief is something I learned to build for myself. Every page of my proof book reminded me that I wasn't what they said I was. I wasn't disposable. I wasn't a mistake. And I sure as hell wasn't done. I was 14 when I saw my brother again. Not in person, just on a screen. One of the newer girls at the orphanage had a stolen smartphone. It didn't have a SIM card, but it connected to the office Wi-Fi if you were sneaky. She let me borrow it sometimes when the staff wasn't looking. I didn't use it to chat or scroll like the others. I had only one reason: to search for my past. It started with a name, Morgan, last name, my little brother. At first, nothing came up. Just random faces, sports results, a few kids his age from other cities. But then I found a picture tagged by someone else, an old family friend, maybe. It was a birthday photo. There he was. 11 years old now. Taller. Wearing a suit too big for him, but smiling wide, surrounded by people in a decorated living room. Balloons, cake, gifts piled high. And my mother. She was in the background, blurry, holding a plate and laughing. She looked fine. Not poor. Not broken. Not like someone who had to give up a child to survive. I stared at the photo for minutes. Not moving. Not blinking. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't felt in years. They were happy. They were living, celebrating, giving him everything, while I was in a shared dorm eating rice and lentils, wondering if my next pair of shoes would be donated in my size. The more I searched, the more I found. Photos from school events, vacations, piano recitals. He had friends. He played soccer. He wore crisp uniforms and had clean, bright sneakers. The kind I used to dream of when I walked past store windows in town. They hadn't just erased me from their lives. They had replaced me. I wondered sometimes if they told Morgan I existed. Did he know he had an older sister? Did they make up a story, say I died, or moved far away, or never existed at all? Did he ever ask why there were no baby pictures of me on the walls? Or had they convinced him that he was, and always had been, an only child? It wasn't Morgan's fault. But in that moment, I hated him anyway. Not because he had a birthday cake or nice shoes or a living room full of family. I hated that he had belonging. He had what I prayed for every night before I stopped praying altogether. But I didn't cry. I closed the phone and handed it back to the girl, who didn't ask questions. I walked to the library and opened my proof book. I turned to a fresh page and wrote in big, bold letters, I will never need them again. Under it, I listed everything I had to do: get out of the orphanage. Learn everything I could. Make my own name. Become someone they couldn't ignore, even if they tried. The next day, I applied for a youth tech competition in the city. I lied about my address and used the orphanage's general line as my contact. I submitted a basic web design I had been practicing at night. It didn't win, but it got shortlisted. One of the judges emailed me directly, curious about how a 14-year-old from a small city school had learned such skills on her own. That email changed everything. His name was Mr. Rayhan. He ran a small startup in another city and invited me to join a virtual mentorship group. I told him I didn't have a personal laptop. He replied, I'm sending one over. Don't say no. For the first time in years, someone believed I was worth investing in, even if he didn't know my whole story. While Morgan lived his life as the chosen child, I became the hidden one. But I realized something important: his comfort wasn't my competition. Yes, they chose him. But I chose me. And I chose not to rot in bitterness. I chose to rise in silence. There were still nights when the lights went off in the dorm and I would stare at the ceiling, wondering what it felt like to fall asleep in a warm bed, in a house that felt like yours. But that sadness no longer made me weak. It became fuel. Every missed birthday, every old pair of shoes, every awkward glance from the staff, it all turned into something sharper. Focused. I didn't just want to escape the orphanage. I wanted to build something bigger than anything they ever imagined for me. I wanted success they'd see on a screen and realize, too late, who they left behind. One evening, during a special weekend program, a social worker brought in a guest speaker, a young woman who had started a business from nothing. She spoke to us about grit, self-discipline, and turning trauma into triumph. At the end, she said something that stayed with me. You don't have to come from a powerful family to be powerful. I smiled quietly, knowing that's exactly what I was becoming. Morgan could have their love, their home, their money. That was fine. Because I was building something better, a life no one could take away.
There's no celebration when you turn 18 at an orphanage. Just a thin envelope from the administration, a bag with your few belongings, and a polite goodbye that sounds more like good luck surviving. When the day came, I didn't cry. I had known this moment was coming for years. I'd watched older girls before me walk out of the gates. Some of them promised to stay in touch. Most didn't. Life outside wasn't kind. Some came back for visits wearing bruises and fake smiles. Others just disappeared. I had been preparing for this for as long as I could remember. Still, when I stood at the edge of the orphanage gate, holding my bag and my worn-out proof book, I felt like the ground beneath me had fallen away. For the first time in years, there was no schedule to follow, no lights-out bell, no free meals or donated clothes, just me, and a world that didn't care if I made it or not. I didn't even have a place to sleep that night. With the small savings I'd earned from a few online gigs, I bought a one-way bus ticket to the city where my mentor, Mr. Rehen, lived. He had once said, "If you're ever serious about building your future, come here." I had emailed him last week, letting him know. His reply was short but warm. "The door's open. I'll see what I can do." It was the most support anyone had offered me in years. When I arrived at the city bus station, the noise, the traffic, the people, it was all overwhelming. But under the chaos, I felt something else. Freedom. No one knew me. No one whispered about my past. I wasn't the girl who was abandoned anymore. I was just Alina, alone, but free. I stayed at a cheap hostel for women that charged by the week. My room was tiny, barely big enough for a mattress and a fan, but it was mine. No one watched me like I was a case file. I sat on the floor the first night, opened my laptop, and cried. Not because I was sad, but because I had made it out. Over the next few weeks, I worked hard. Harder than I ever had. I took freelance jobs from anyone willing to pay. I designed logos, fixed websites, cleaned up bad code, and even managed social media pages for small businesses. Some clients paid late. Some didn't pay at all. But slowly, my skills sharpened. My confidence grew. Mr. Rehen. They weren't rich or famous, just people who had once been nobodies like me. They gave me honest feedback and let me sit in on meetings. One woman, Samina, ran a community project that offered tech training for women in low-income areas. She let me help with lesson planning. "Your brain works like a machine," she told me once, "but your heart." I didn't. In between work, I kept writing in my proof book. I wrote about every little win, my first $100 project, my first good review. The time I stayed up all night fixing a website. Those little things kept me going when money was tight, or the loneliness hit too hard. I barely ate some days, surviving on instant noodles and black tea. but I told myself it was temporary. Struggle wasn't new to me, but now, at least, it was on my terms. Sometimes I passed by expensive restaurants or saw families eating together, and that ache returned. That ache of being unclaimed, unmissed. I wondered what Morgan was doing now. Was he in college, playing sports? Did he think about me at all? I considered messaging him once. I typed out a whole letter in a notepad file, explaining. I even found his social media profile, but something inside me stopped. He had their love, their protection, their attention. He didn't need me showing up and shaking that world. Besides, I hadn't built mine yet. One evening, I sat on a rooftop overlooking the city skyline. I was flipping through the pages, rereading old dreams. Then I came across the sentence I had written years ago in shaky, angry handwriting. I will own a house they can never afford. I smiled, not because I had done it, not yet, but because now it didn't seem impossible. It felt inevitable. That's when the idea came to me, something more than just freelancing. An app that could help kids like me, orphaned, abandoned, overlooked. I would call it Lifted, as in lift education. Lift yourself. It started as a sketch in the back of my notebook, then a prototype on my laptop, then a pitch deck. I worked on it every night after my freelance jobs. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about making something out of nothing, just like I had. And in the quiet of that small, rented room, with peeling walls and a leaky ceiling, but I would build everything.
Lifted started with a question: what if kids like me didn't have to figure it all out alone? That thought grew in the quiet corners of my rented room, late at night after work, when the city outside was dark and all I had was a blinking cursor and a head full of fire. I remembered the nights I spent at the orphanage, sitting on the cold floor with a pencil and torn notebook, not knowing how the world worked, not even sure if it would ever let someone like me succeed. I didn't want any other kid to feel that way. Not if I could help it. So I started building. I wasn't sure what the app would look like yet, or even if it would work. But I knew what it needed to feel like: a map. A guide. A place where someone could go when the world had gone silent on them. I called it Lifted, part education, part lifting yourself up. It sounded small at first, but even saying the name made me sit a little straighter. I didn't have any funding, no marketing, no team. Just my secondhand laptop, my proof book, and a list of features I scribbled on sticky notes stuck to the wall. A scholarship search tool. A free resume builder. A mentor chat system. I knew I couldn't build everything at once. So I started with what I knew best: design. I created the wireframe, then the layout. I coded every line myself, testing it again and again until it didn't crash when someone clicked a button. I shared it with a few kids I met through Samina's training classes. They gave honest feedback, some of it brutal. It's boring. It's confusing. Why would anyone use this? But I kept going. Every critique made it better. Stronger. While other people my age were attending college parties, taking weekend trips, or sleeping in, I was spending every waking hour refining code and learning business basics on YouTube. The more I worked, the more it felt like the right path, like this is what all the pain had been leading me toward. Not just success for myself, but something that could give others a fighting chance. It wasn't long before Mr. Rayhan noticed what I was doing. He had always kept a respectful distance, letting me figure things out on my own, but one day he said, "I've been watching what you're building. And I think it's time the world saw it too." He invited me to pitch Lifted at a small tech event, not a big one, just a local meetup of developers and investors. I had never pitched before. I didn't even know how to speak confidently in front of people. But I said yes. The night before the event, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing what I'd say, worried that my voice would shake or that someone would ask me where I went to school, and I'd have to lie or tell the truth and face that awkward silence again. But when I stood in front of that small room, with my presentation slides ready and my laptop trembling in my hands, something strange happened. I looked into the audience and didn't see strangers. I saw the girls I used to live with. I saw myself at 7 years old, holding Lily the bunny and wondering why I wasn't enough. I told them the truth. I told them about the orphanage. About how I'd been left behind. About how everything I was building came from that pain. "This isn't just an app," I said. "It's the lifeline I wish I had when I had nothing." When I finished, the room was quiet, and then, slowly, someone clapped. Then another. And another. Afterward, a woman in a blue blazer approached me. Her name was Nora, and she ran a small impact investment fund for tech startups created by women. She didn't offer a $1 million deal. She didn't promise the world. What she did offer was even more valuable: mentorship, a small grant, and office space in a shared co-working building. I said yes on the spot. That was the beginning of something real. Not just hope, but movement. With Nora's help, I started building a team. I brought in 2 young developers I met through online forums. Both of them had similar stories to mine. We called ourselves the Quiet Rebellion. Our mission? To change the narrative for kids who had been thrown away. To give them tools, not pity. As the app grew, so did the attention. We were featured in a blog about tech for good, then a podcast, then a short news clip. My inbox started filling with messages from kids, social workers, and even teachers asking how to access Lifted. Some asked me to speak at schools. One girl from a shelter in Lahore messaged, "Your story gave me hope." I thought I was alone. I cried reading that. For years, I thought I had been building something for me. But maybe this was bigger than me. Maybe this was the purpose behind all the pain. And in the middle of it all, one evening as I checked analytics on my phone, over 12,000 users in just a few months, I received a friend request on social media. It was Morgan. I stared at the name for minutes, unsure what to feel. He had grown. Taller. His smile looked the same. I didn't accept right away. But that click, that request, was proof. Proof that I had surfaced from the deep. That the girl they left behind had become the woman they could no longer ignore. Success didn't come with fireworks. It came with quiet mornings where I didn't have to count coins to buy tea. It came with a steady internet connection, my own desk, and emails that began with "We love what you're doing." It came with people saying thank you instead of sorry when they heard my story. And for someone like me, who had been treated like a mistake for most of her life, that felt louder than any applause. Lifted started getting serious attention. The number of users grew by the thousands. Schools reached out, asking if they could integrate it into their student counseling systems. Orphanages from other cities began using it to help kids apply for scholarships. One shelter director wrote, "Your app helped a girl get into university. First one from our home in 12 years." That message hit me hard. I sat there, holding my phone, letting the words sink in. What I had once scribbled in my proof book as a dream was now changing lives. That's when the calls from media started. The first was a podcast. A small one, just two hosts interviewing women in tech. But I agreed. I sat in a quiet room, knees bouncing under the table, trying not to sound nervous as I spoke into the mic. I told my story the way it was. No drama, no sugarcoating. I wasn't rescued, I said. No one came for me. I had to build my way out. And now, I'm building ladders for others. The episode went viral. People shared it across platforms with captions like, "This girl turned pain into purpose and from orphanage to tech founder, must listen." Soon after, I got a call from a national television network. They wanted to feature me on a special program highlighting young entrepreneurs making a social impact. I hesitated. Being in front of a camera felt too exposed. I wasn't used to attention. I was used to being forgotten. But Nora looked me in the eyes and said, "You're not just building an app, Alina. You're rebuilding a new identity for yourself and for every girl who has ever been told she wasn't enough." So I said yes. The TV interview changed everything. They filmed me in the co-working space, talking to my team, showing old pictures from the orphanage, even capturing me flipping through my worn-out proof book. When the episode aired, people saw not just a startup, but a story. And people love stories. Within days, companies reached out for partnerships. Donors offered support. I was invited to youth panels, tech conferences, and global webinars. Newspapers called me the girl who refused to disappear. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen, not because of who I was born to, but because of who I became. One evening, after a long day of back-to-back calls, I sat alone on the balcony of my new apartment. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. The city lights blinked below, like stars that had chosen to land on Earth. I made myself tea, opened my notebook, and started a new section in my proof book titled, "The Life They Said I Couldn't Have." I wrote, "Wake up in my own home. Be on TV. Help 10,000 kids. Build something that outlives me, hourglass not done." The last one wasn't done yet, but I was getting close. That night, I finally accepted Morgan's friend request. A message popped up minutes later. "Morgan, I just watched your interview. I didn't know." "I'm sorry, Alina." I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I had dreamed of this message, imagined it hundreds of times, him apologizing, asking questions, maybe even trying to reconnect. But now that it was real, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. I typed back slowly. "Alina, it's okay. It wasn't your fault. I'm glad you're doing well." He responded instantly. "Can we meet sometime?" I didn't reply right away. I didn't know if I was ready. But a strange peace filled me. Not because I forgave everything, but because I no longer needed anything from them. Not love. Not validation. Not explanation. I had become whole without them. The invitation came unexpectedly. It wasn't a letter or a formal email, just a message on my social media from an old neighbor. "Your parents are throwing a party for your brother's graduation. Full house. Everyone's invited. I think you should know." For a few minutes, I just sat there, staring at it. My hands stayed still, but inside, something cracked open. A graduation party. For Morgan. He'd done it, finished school, maybe even gotten into a good university. They were proud. They were celebrating. Just like I had once dreamed they would do for me. But they hadn't. When I graduated, alone, from the online school I'd enrolled in secretly, there was no celebration. I didn't even have a real cap or gown. I had printed my certificate at a local shop, smiled at myself in a mirror, and made noodles for dinner. That was my graduation. Quiet. Unseen. Forgotten. Now, years later, they were inviting the world to cheer for Morgan. I wasn't angry. Not in the way I used to be. This time, it wasn't rage that stirred inside me, it was something sharper. Colder. A final question that had waited too long to be answered. Would they even recognize me now? Would they pretend I never existed if I showed up? I didn't reply to the neighbor. I just bookmarked the date in my mind. Not because I needed their acceptance, I had long stopped needing that. But because it was time. Time to return not as the girl they discarded, but as the woman they had tried to erase. On the day of the party, I wore a soft beige dress and flats. Simple. Professional. Not flashy. I didn't want to walk in as a spectacle. I wanted to walk in as proof. My hair was tied back. My laptop was in my bag, not for work, but for what I was about to do. The house hadn't changed much. The same iron gate. The same garden. The same yellow paint that had always chipped in the same places. But it looked smaller now. Less intimidating. I could see people moving inside, lights glowing, laughter spilling out the windows. I hesitated for a second at the gate. Then I stepped in. No one recognized me at first. Why would they? To them, I was just another guest, another face in the crowd. I could hear Morgan's name being called out. Someone made a toast. People cheered. I walked into the living room and saw him. Morgan. Taller, broader, more mature. He was standing next to our parents, my parents, who looked exactly the same. Older, maybe. But not changed. My mother held a glass of juice. My father wore a polished smile. They looked like a family that had everything they needed. Except me. I moved through the crowd slowly until I was standing only a few feet away. My mother turned first. Her smile faltered, as if she wasn't sure whether to trust her eyes. Alina, she whispered. I nodded once. My voice was steady. Hello. Silence spread like a wave. My father turned, blinking. Morgan looked confused. Then stunned. Then speechless. For a few moments, no one said a word. The music in the background continued, as if unaware of the tension. A few guests looked on, curious. My mother stepped forward, her expression caught between guilt and disbelief. We didn't know where you were. You never. You left me, I said. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just the truth. At an orphanage. I was 7. You made me promise to take care of him, and then you never came back. My father tried to step in. It was complicated, Alina. We didn't have a choice, you had a choice, I interrupted, looking directly at him. You chose him. And that's fine. I've made peace with it. But don't tell me you didn't have options. You just didn't choose me. Morgan finally spoke. His voice was soft. I didn't know. They never told me. I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel anger. Just sadness. I don't blame you, Morgan. You were a child. I hope you had a good life. I did, he said quietly. But now I feel like it was built on something broken. No, I replied, this time even softer. It was built on choices. And so was mine. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. The room was silent now, eyes on me. I opened it, clicked a few times, and turned the screen toward them. It showed Lifted's dashboard: 80,000 plus users, active mentorships, impact stats. I let them take it in. I built something from the ground up, I said. Without you. And I'm not here to ask for anything. Not your approval. Not your money. Not even your apology. I looked at my mother then. I'm just here to return what you gave me, nothing. And I am here to say thank you, because the day you left me was the day I started becoming everything I am now. No one said anything for a long time. I gently closed the laptop, nodded once to Morgan, and turned to leave. As I reached the door, my father called out, "Alina, wait." I stopped but didn't turn. "We're proud of you," he said, voice heavy. "We didn't know, we had no idea you'd become this." I gave a small smile, facing forward. "That's the thing," I said. "You never knew who I was. And now, you never will." Then I walked out. After the confrontation at the party, something inside me shifted. I wasn't broken or overwhelmed. I wasn't crying in secret or replaying the words over and over. In truth, I felt light. Clear. Like I had finally stepped out of the shadow of something that had followed me for most of my life. It was done, not forgotten, but faced. And in facing them, I finally freed myself from the part of me that still craved something from them. But with that freedom came a new responsibility. I had made it out. I had found purpose, built a life, made something powerful. And now, I had to decide what came next. Not just for Lifted, not just for the kids we were helping, but for me. A few days after the party, I received an invitation to speak at an international tech summit in Singapore. It was the biggest platform I'd ever been offered: CEOs, government officials, philanthropists, venture capitalists. People who could change lives with a single investment or endorsement. I was shocked they even knew who I was. The email read, "Your work represents more than innovation, it represents survival, grit, and the kind of impact tech was meant to create. We would be honored to hear your story." I accepted, of course. But something held me back as I packed my bag. A strange question that kept floating in the back of my mind: what happens after the story is told? For so long, I'd been living because of my past. Every win, every step forward had felt like a reaction to what had been taken from me. But I didn't want to live in reaction anymore. I wanted to start building something that wasn't about who hurt me, but who I had chosen to become. That was the real turning point. The summit was a dream. I walked on stage in front of 1,000 faces, not one of them from my past, and shared everything. I talked about being abandoned, surviving the system, building Lifted, and the importance of technology that doesn't just serve profit, but people. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I spoke with calm fire. And when I walked off stage, something incredible happened. A woman from a global foundation came up to me and said, "We want to help fund Lifted in 10 new countries. You've built a bridge, and we want to help you stretch it further." Just like that, everything leveled up. We hired more staff. We translated the app into 4 languages. We opened regional hubs in underserved areas. For the first time, I had the resources to not just survive, but scale. That's when I made another big decision. I bought a house. Not just any house, a mansion. A quiet, beautiful estate in the very city I was abandoned in. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't about showing off. It was symbolic. I wanted to reclaim the place that had once made me feel invisible. The house had large windows, a tall gate, and a peaceful garden. But the most important thing? It had rooms. Rooms I planned to fill with young girls from broken homes who had nowhere to go but up. I called it the Lift House, a safe space. A transition home. A launching pad. Not an orphanage, never that. But a sanctuary where they could rest, learn, and build their own proof books. A place where they were never reminded of what they lacked, only what they had the power to create. One afternoon, as I stood in the doorway of my new home, watching a group of girls learning to code in the study, Morgan messaged me again. "Morgan, I saw the news. Lift House is beautiful. You're doing something big." I replied a few hours later. "Alina, thank you. You're welcome to visit someday, if you'd like to see what survival looks like when it thrives." He didn't respond right away. But the next day, he showed up. He stood at the gate, hands in his pockets, nervous like a boy again. I walked out to meet him. For a moment, we just stood there, two people who had grown up on opposite sides of a lie. He finally said, "I wish they had told me about you." "I know," I replied gently. "But it doesn't matter now." He looked around the house behind me. "You really did it." I nodded. "And I'm just getting started." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. It wasn't that kind of moment. But it was a beginning. Not of a repaired family, but of something honest. Later that night, I sat by my window, my proof book open beside me. The pages were full now. Goals crossed off. Pain turned to power. Dreams that had once been far away now living just outside my front door. And for the first time, I didn't write what I wanted to prove to anyone else. I just wrote one thing: I am not what they left behind. I am what they'll never catch up to. There's something strange that happens when you stop chasing approval, the world begins to follow you. I didn't build Lifted to become famous. I didn't start it to prove I was better than the people who left me behind. In the beginning, it was survival. A reason to get out of bed. A reason to stay awake a little longer each night, just to make something out of the wreckage of my childhood. But somewhere along the way, it became much more than that. It became a legacy. Lifted wasn't just a tool anymore, it was a lifeline. Thousands of young people across countries were using the app. Some were applying to colleges. Some were finding mentors. Others were getting their very first job interviews, sending me messages that made my heart feel like it might burst. "Miss Alina, I got into nursing school. Your app helped me escape my aunt's house. I'm in a dorm now. I found a mentor who taught me how to code. I want to build something like you one day." Every message reminded me that pain, when transformed, becomes the most powerful thing in the world. Not because it disappears, but because it becomes fuel. I started hosting workshops under the Lifted Foundation. Real-world sessions for girls and boys from shelters, orphanages, and broken homes. I would bring them into Lift House, not just to teach, but to listen. They would sit on bean bags with laptops on their knees, wide-eyed and hopeful, asking the same questions I once had. What if no one wants me? What if I fail? What if I'm too late? And every time, I would tell them the truth: you are not too late. You are right on time. And the people who didn't want you? They'll never know what they missed. At some point, I stopped counting how many lives we were touching. It wasn't about numbers anymore. It was about impact. Real, breathing stories that were being rewritten, one child, one scholarship, one mentor at a time. Then, something happened I never expected. A prestigious university reached out to me. The same type of institution I had once been denied even the dream of. They wanted to award me an honorary doctorate in humanitarian technology. Not because I had academic credentials, but because I had used my pain to engineer purpose for others. When I stood on that grand stage in a black robe and cap, holding a certificate with Dr. Alina Fahim written on it, the same girl who once cried over a torn notebook and instant noodles, I felt something I'd never known before. Not pride. Peace. Because I had made it, not in spite of what was done to me, but through it. That night, I returned to Lift House and placed the certificate on a simple wooden shelf, beside my old proof book. I didn't frame it in gold or hang it high. I wanted it to sit right beside where I started, to remind me, and every kid who passed through my doors, that paper doesn't define you. Perseverance does. My team celebrated with me. So did Morgan, who had slowly begun volunteering at Lift House in small, quiet ways. He didn't talk much about the past, and I didn't ask him to. Some wounds aren't healed by talking, they're healed by showing up differently. He showed up. That was enough. Months passed. Lifted expanded across borders. We opened sister homes in other countries. I hired some of the girls I had mentored, one of them became our lead developer. Another started a scholarship program named Second Chance. The world was beginning to listen to the voices it once ignored. But the most emotional moment came on a normal Thursday afternoon. A woman arrived at the Lift House gate. She was older. Her face worn by time. A soft scarf around her head. I didn't recognize her at first. Then she said, "Alina, I'm your mother." I stared at her, speechless. Her voice was quiet. Humble. Her eyes red, as if she had practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times. She looked at the house behind me, the garden, the girls, the peace, and said, "I didn't come to ask for anything. I needed to see what you became." For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to turn away. Another part wanted to scream. But the woman in front of me, she wasn't the towering mother who left me behind. She was just a fragile, regretful person standing in the shadow of what I had built. I said nothing for a long while. Then I whispered, "You can sit. But you can't stay." She nodded. And we sat. Two women. Two timelines. One silence. That day, I didn't forgive everything. I didn't pretend the past didn't matter. But I realized something powerful: forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means you no longer carry the burden on your back. I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for me. For the girls who walked these halls. For the boy who didn't know the truth but learned to stand beside it. For the woman I had become. And for the little girl who was never claimed, but rose anyway. The sun was setting as I walked barefoot through the garden of the Lift House, the grass cool beneath my feet. It was one of those golden evenings where everything looked softer, the sky blushed with pink, the leaves shimmering as if they too were breathing easier. This garden hadn't always looked this way. When I first bought the house, the land was dry, broken, forgotten, just like I had been. But now, it bloomed. Lavender, jasmine, marigold. Things that took time to grow. Things that needed care. That's what life had taught me: healing isn't a moment. It's a season. And my season had finally come full circle. Inside, the girls were busy. Some were laughing in the kitchen. A few sat on the living room floor, working through a coding lesson. One of them, Sana, barely 13, caught my eye through the window and waved. She used to flinch at every loud sound when she first arrived. Now she smiled like sunlight. That was the legacy I had hoped for. Not my name in papers or awards in my office. But this. Peace in small moments. Safety for the ones who never had it. That morning, I had received an unexpected envelope. No sender. Just my name in handwriting I hadn't seen in over a decade. It was from the orphanage. Inside, I found something simple, a thank you note, signed by the new director, and a photograph. It was a picture of me at age 8. Sitting on the orphanage steps, holding Lily, my old stuffed bunny. I was smiling. A real smile, even then. I traced the edge of the photo with my thumb. That girl, she had no idea what waited for her. No idea how hard it would get. And yet, she smiled anyway. I whispered to the picture, "You made it." I didn't realize I was crying until a tear landed on the corner of the page. Later that day, Morgan stopped by. He didn't knock anymore. He had become a quiet part of the lift house, tutoring, fixing broken furniture, helping the girls with their science lessons. We didn't talk about the past much. We didn't need to. But today, he came in holding something, a small, neatly wrapped box. "For you," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "It's not my birthday." "I know," he smiled. "But it's been 10 years. 10 years. It hit me like a wave. 10 years since they'd left me behind. 10 years since I stood at that iron gate, clutching my brother's hand, waiting for parents who never came back. I opened the box. Inside was a tiny replica of the lift house, carved from wood. Every detail, the front door, the little windows, the garden, perfectly captured. I looked up at him. "You made this?" He nodded. I thought, maybe it's time we start remembering the good. I smiled. We're not just remembering it. We're living it. That evening, I held a small celebration. Nothing fancy. Just the girls, my team, and a few close friends who had become like family. We made a big dinner together, rice, grilled vegetables, cake that one of the girls baked too early so it sank in the middle. Still, everyone ate it like it was gold. After dinner, we sat under the fairy lights in the garden. Laughter echoed through the air, soft music playing from a speaker someone brought outside. Then, they asked me to speak. I stood in the middle of the group, barefoot still, my old proof book in hand. "I want to tell you something," I began. "A few years ago, I thought I was born to be forgotten. I thought the world had decided I didn't matter." A few girls leaned in closer. But then I realized, the world doesn't decide who we are. We do. Every day we choose to stand, to try, to love again, we're rewriting the story. I held up the proof book. This was my map when I had nothing. And now, I want you to start your own. I handed out blank notebooks, one by one. No rules. No templates. Just empty pages waiting to be filled. They held them like treasure. The next morning, I walked alone down the street where my old orphanage used to be. It had been torn down a year ago. In its place stood a new building, bright, open, designed for foster care and education. There was no sign of the cold walls, the leaky ceiling, the sleepless nights. But I didn't feel sorrow. I felt peace. I placed a small flower on the sidewalk, lavender, my favorite, and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you to the pain. To the silence. To the hunger. To the loneliness. Because without it, I wouldn't have become me." Now, years later, Lifted is used in over 20 countries. Our foundation has helped more than 200,000 children find their footing. The girls who once needed saving now save others. They teach. They mentor. They rise. And me? I no longer live to prove anything. I live to create, to hold space for the forgotten, to remind the world that strength isn't loud, it's quiet persistence. It's showing up after being broken. It's building a home when no one ever built one for you. It's choosing love even when life gave you none. And when people ask me, Alina, how did you do it? I smile and say, I didn't wait for a rescue. I became my own.